fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
And so all these
I
lessons
like
we
that
have to learn,
perspective.
right?
So
Yeah,
annoying.
me too.
Yeah.
All right, quiet.
Quiet on staff. That was Jimmy Stewart, I think, almost.
Wow.
Not bad.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, just do what feels right.
Great. so, and we're rolling and
You're
ready.
rolling.
Great. I'm sitting here with Eric Yelsma of the Detroit Denim Company, and it's great to have this conversation with you. And I love sharing leadership conversations because I think it's important for us all to know it's messy business, this thing called
Little
leadership,
bit.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear about the kind of the messiness of your transition to Detroit Denim Company. It's not like you left college and said, I'm going to start a denim company and here we go. Talk about how it was a messy journey.
Yeah, I didn't really know where I was going when I started. I just knew I had this passion and this thing that I, quite frankly, just desperately wanted to do. And I mean, probably so much, it was like I had to do it. And with that, I had to talk myself into it for a lot of reasons of what it was I was wanting to do, which is make apparel in the U.S. But
Which, no brainer, right? Make apparel in the
yeah,
U.S., in Detroit.
Why not? I mean, only 2% of our clothes are actually made here anymore. Let's go and let's swim upstream as hard as we can. But it did take this change of events, working at a big corporate situation that really gave me the impetus to make that shift, that transition. But I'm glad I did it. I'm glad it happened. I've never worked harder. I've never believed more in what I was doing, and I don't think I've ever been as personally fulfilled either. But this is that we're entering our 6th year of business. So I call ourselves a 5-year startup.
Yeah. What exactly are you learning these days about leadership, and do you see you through that lens?
I'm starting to see myself through that lens. So when I started, 5+ years ago, it was me. It was me and a bunch of sewing machines. So leadership's pretty easy. And it was just me doing what I wanted with full autonomy. And as we slowly added employees to the mix, there was a need for direction, and there was a need for what's our culture, how do we communicate with people. And I can remember early on, some of the struggles I had was just thinking, well, if I challenge people and they ask me a question of like, what do you want me to do? And me to, like some other very wise leaders would respond with a question or not a direct answer, that it would be all good. But I can remember significantly frustrating people with them asking me what I expected from them and not giving them an answer.
You wanted to be the old sage
saying,
what do you think?
Yeah.
What
and,
do you
here's a perfect learning opportunity. And life is full of learning opportunities, but there's also a time where life requires clear direction of what your expectations are. So that's been a big hurdle for me early on, is just clearly communicating these are my expectations in terms of when, how, where, all those specifics.
The simple things, actually, but important if they're not clear.
Well, I know what I'm doing. You should know what you're doing.
What was the catalyst in your thinking to help you to realize that, oh man, I know my product, I know the analytics of these things and all of that, but our company is going to stall if I don't start practicing leadership. What was the catalyst? What helped you start seeing it?
People, frankly, telling me that. Being told like, hey, we need some leadership here, and not in terms such as that, but people asking, people wanting that. What do we do, and why are we doing it this way? So there's basics of leadership that I can grasp onto, and I have to. I agree with you totally. It's a nuanced thing. It's not like, here, just read this book and you're set. It's read these 100 books, and then maybe you're sort of scratching the surface, and you'll get lucky.
You'll filter some things down through and all that. And
what works for
your progression's
you.
Interesting, especially as it relates to the lens of leadership. I mean, to be a junior or mid-level executive, dealing a lot with product knowledge, dealing a lot with specific disciplines of study and application, and maybe some management. To then do the startup. So talk to me about your own transition, and I know you're in the midst of it, we all are, quite frankly, but of going from looking at the smaller picture of the activity of your business to the larger picture of vision and direction, and then how to influence people to do what you used to do. Because you're replacing yourself, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so there's the tactical aspects of it, of like just simple, do this, or this is how we do it. But if you bring it up to a more strategic level of what is our vision, and for us it's like, what is our brand? What do we stand for? And we have, I think, some very nice statements. I call it a manifesto in terms of where our values are and why we're doing what we do. But you still need a ton of direction in terms of just navigating the market. And it's curious for where we are, because the denim market is huge. I mean, we're talking tens of billions of dollars on a global scale, and just in North America, you're talking $15 billion we spend on jeans. And so we are like a sliver of a sliver of a sliver for that. So decisions that we make and how I lead through that are critical. And so and that's just from the market side, but then you turn it around and like, how do we actually run this business and get people, create a culture?
I see leadership kind of as a three-disciplined process. It's kind of like there's vision, which is the direction issue. It's big picture. Someone's got to be seeing it and knowing the landscape. Then there's alignment, which is the organizational things. How do we create the systems or the organizations and the layers of an organization to make it happen from one to now your employees and where you're going, and making sure that you don't lose the passion of the upstart as you become larger and more successful. That alignment issue is a huge part of leadership. And then the last one is inspiration. It's kind of like breathing the soul into it, making sure that people are inspired for the right reasons and not being deflated. Which is the most natural part to your leadership bent?
Vision.
Okay.
Vision's the easy part. I know what I'm doing, what I want this to be, where I want it to go. And I think the most challenging part, you're probably going to ask me next.
Yeah, why not?
is aligning all of those resources, and that's probably the most intensive. So you can kind of hole away for a personal retreat and figure out these things, and it all comes together beautifully, and it's a wonderful process. But then it's like, all right, rubber now hits the road,
right?
And that's
a
kicker for me.
I actually have found that I can envision a lot of things, but it often, I see its accomplishment in me charging that hill and other people drafting on me. It's a lot more difficult to see that process and to be able to put all the pieces in alignment that aren't you charging the hill, and it's still happening as if you were charging the hill. Are you going through some of that drama in your business growth
definitely.
now?
Yeah. There's classic conflicts of like, production wants to do what production wants to do, and sales wants what sales wants, and it's not always perfectly aligned. So how do you bring those two together to support each other?
Yeah, I have found one of the big transitions in leadership. I've been 26 years the lead pastor here at Northridge, and it's like I have found that the most important transition for this organization and the most difficult is my own personal leadership transition, that I don't just stay in the formulas and the styles of leadership I'm at. And it's hard because you have to change what you know, what you do, and sometimes against your personality type and all that. I used to lead intuitionally. I now have to lead intentionally. It's very different. It has to be learned and thoughtful. Are you moving through that from an intuitional style of leadership to having to be far more intentional? And are you finding it difficult?
Yes, and yes. Really, yeah. I mean, and I think you put it very succinctly that initially it is very intuitional. It's just you lead by your gut and you know these things, but as things become more complex and you're dealing with a lot more variables and factors, the intentionality is critical. Yeah. And the church is not a static thing, so your leadership should not be static. Well, this worked here, and in the same way for my business. And I constantly am telling myself, that old adage of like, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing and expect different results. So, yeah, you really have to, I mean, for me, I have to struggle with things that aren't initially, who I am, and like, how do I grow and develop myself?
Right. I found that especially as you're in a growing leadership environment, I went through this, and add to it, I was called pastor, right? And pastors are supposed to serve and shepherd and care and touch and visit all the hospitals and all that, and that's how you serve. I mean, and serving's the great characteristic. If you want to be great, you've got to serve. And I found that I started losing my impact in this place because of my failure to see that the greatest service I could give to my church family wasn't doing all the acts of service, but by offering the service of my leadership. And I best serve them by leading. Have you seen in your setting the difficulty of changing your definition of serving and how you can best serve?
Yeah. Exactly what you're saying, and I'm not quite there to that. I can best serve by lead. It's like letting go. First, it runs you ragged, trying to do all these things that aren't the best use of your time, and it's exhausting. But that's really where I'm in the midst of, is that shifting to my leading is the best use. That's the best way to serve people, and it's a no-brainer because I know that my company wants that. And I know it needs it, just for pure viability. It needs someone to decide, here's what we're doing, that vision, and here's how we're doing it, and then how to inspire.
So you've been in the rawest, most organic place of business. I mean, where the sausage is being made, trying to figure out starting this thing, going all in. Well, I'd be curious, greatest highs, greatest lows in this thing?
It is an absolute roller coaster ride, and there's dozens of greatest highs and dozens of greatest lows. And let me preface with, I have days where like, we got this. Like, you're telling yourself, and you're like, everything's coming together. We've got our sales are lining up. We have the production. Like, everything is sort of all hitting, and I don't want to suggest that after 5 years and putting my every penny I have and making way less than minimum wage, that I have arrived. So I have a lot of lows too, and typically those are around payroll weeks. Of how are we going to make, or we got payroll here, but what's next? So there are. I want to give you a specific story of some of the lows, but I firmly believe in hiring and training Detroiters, and so it's a very unfortunate. But we brought in a gentleman. He went, he's a Detroiter, and it was very challenging just to get him hired, just to kind of get him to show up, and it wasn't but a matter of weeks, and then showing up high, not showing up, leaving after lunch, and wanting so bad to give someone all the help that you can, but then having to make a very hard decision of like, it has to stop. It's we've done everything we can, and sitting down with someone and just saying, hey, it's not working out. So I can't imagine there are many people out there that enjoy doing that, but it is is tough as it was for me. Think about this person that I'm like, here's one chance you have that you may not have for a long, long time, and it's gone.
And it's one of the hardest parts of leadership, isn't it? Because it feels like you're taking away the value of the individual because you're letting them go, but it's got nothing to do with that. And so balancing the tension, I value you as a human being. It's why I brought you in the first place. But I have this responsibility to all these other human beings I value, and if you're not gonna make the investment, if you're not gonna show up, then I have to help you find a place where you'll be passionate enough to do it, and I have to protect the environment of all these other people that are valuable to you.
Yeah, there's two very weighty things there. I mean, I imagine you've had to do the same.
It's huge, and by the way, when a pastor letting someone go, and some of the hardest things I've ever done, quite frankly, deal with realizing that this person that I care deeply for, this person that I have a high level of value for, and believe that God has made with just the right gifts for the right place, is in the wrong place. And the easy thing would be to make myself comfortable and to let them exist outside of the perfect place for their gifts to express themselves so that I don't have to make the hard call. Because a lot of people, it's kind of like your story. It's like I was into the security of my job. I wasn't going to pursue the dream, and someone had to bring it down. A lot of people will exist in the wrong environment just because they're comfortable or it's secure. And I've had to get to the place where I've said, I need to give you the greatest gift I'm ever going to give you. It's going to feel like I'm doing it to hurt you, but it's truly because I'm valuing you, because you don't fit here. And this is going to be a miserable experience for you and for me. It'll hurt the team. It'll hurt our mission. It'll hurt you. And so I'm going to help you move on. And it's the single most difficult thing, but you're now experiencing the greatest joys and treasures of your life because that was done to you.
Having gone through that in the worst possible
right.
way.
And I've seen people, and not everybody gets over the bitterness. Not everybody. I mean, I'm still Beelzebub to some people and all that. Pastor Beelzebub, of course, but still Beelzebub. But there are many people out there, they're in their perfect environment because of that very difficult moment. But leadership sucks sometimes, you know?
Yeah, you got to do the hard thing.
Yeah.
I have people relying on me. I have 7 people relying on me for their livelihood, and it's a bit of stress. It's a bit of pressure, and so when I started, it wasn't like, hey, I want to have people, they're
depending on me.
They're not their survival, but just how they get by, depending on me and my leadership. So while that's a tough spot, it's also a pretty rewarding spot too.
Sure.
But
it goes both ways.
Yeah. It's maybe a little bit of an honor to be able to be put in that position of providing. And I think that's, we talked a little bit about serving. Maybe that's the way I'm serving, is like, let me lead you and provide you a good job.
Absolutely. And in this process of highs and lows,
yeah.
Do you find that, like, because you even said making payroll, doing these different things, I mean, there was fear in the beginning. Sounds like there's fear now. Is there a difference in the fear, or does it just get bigger?
It does get bigger. There's more weight to it. Early on, when I made this decision of like, hey, if it doesn't work, we all had a good laugh, I'll go back to the thing. It's like, I didn't calculate these other people and these other families into that situation.
Well, that's big.
So,
don't you think that a lot of people who get involved in this thing thinks all the bad parts are front loaded at the beginning of a business, at the beginning of a thing, the beginning thing, it's all front loaded, and then it's like you get to enjoy the fruit if you were successful. There's nothing further. There's nothing further from the truth, right?
No. Yeah, I always think of musicians. And I'm in Detroit, so I hear a lot of rap and that, and you see these rappers, and I see people emulating them of like, I want to be a rapper, so I have all this money and I have all this affluence and prestige, and they just got it made. And a few that I've sort of known or met, like, they're probably some of the hardest working people out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely this curious lens that we see things through, and it's no different than where I am. I'm not like this big fashion guy. I'm just this guy grinding it out, making stuff.
Right.
And well, granted, I love it, but
there's no such thing as arrival, quite frankly. In fact, that once you've arrived, you're off the path. The S-curve's going down. I mean, you've got to be in this dynamic process always, or you lose your touch, right? So just to kind of wrap up the conversation, because we're talking to other leaders, what would be your best little bit of advice about maintaining the dynamic growth of your leadership in an environment that's trying to demand what you used to do?
Well, I guess for anything that's growing, you have to feed it. And I try to feed this need that I have to grow in leading by feeding it. I reach out a lot to people. Having mentors, mentees, and connections. Every time I meet with someone else and get a different perspective, hugely valuable.
That's awesome.
And there's a lot of great resources out there, but I think for me, people are the best resource, and then there's a plethora of other resources that can, I think, help inspire and cause some change in how you lead.
I think it's a good final word. I remember one person said, we'll be the exact same person in 5 years, but for the people we meet and the books we read, and that's exactly what you said, and let's move forward. So, hey,
For sure.
Eric, thanks so much for being a part of this
Oh, you
conversation.
bet.
Really appreciate you
Glad
being
to
here,
be
man.
here.
Thanks.
All right, guys.
And when you need a nice pair of jeans, you know where to go.
I know, and I trust me.
We'll hook you up.
Ever since we had the first meet, I've been going, I'm going to go down and get a pair.
32 classic taper.
Is that, that's what I need to wear?
Yeah.
32
Put jeans
classic
in the freezer,
taper.
is that? That's an old.
I mean, yeah, there's a